I just want to give a quick context walk up from what I've seen from the outside and would love for you to kind of bring us into what had been going on. But as an outsider, my understanding of what had been going on is it seemed like you personally had to really rapidly scale both yourself and your leadership within Loom from being the co-founder and CTO to then also support as the interim head of people. And then on top of that, then serve as CEO while your co-founder was on parental leave. Like, did I get that right? Can you walk us through a little bit about that experience and what that's been like?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's all right. The straddling of the CTO and the VP people position was one that was particularly trying. I think first of all, the VP people position at any technology company, especially over the last couple of years we've been through, is an incredibly difficult position. I have so much empathy for people leaders now because it's like your job is basically to have everybody's problems roll up to you. And you're creating systems to deal with these problems, right? And like people don't know how to deal with their own problems in their own life. And so a lot of times they rely on the systems that you set up at work to deal with problems that they really need to deal with in their own lives. And so the VP people position was basically like going from CTO, where I would largely consider myself one of the best video technology experts in the world. I feel like at this point, like I do feel that way, and it's not me saying it to like feel good about myself. I just feel like that's where I've gotten on that journey. So everything that comes up to me in the CTO role, I'm like, okay, this is a cool new fun project, but I have a very solid foundation of technical expertise that helps me maneuver new problems, even if I haven't seen them. In the VP people world, it was like every single day I was going to get something wrong and not understand what my directors were trying to tell me, and then have to go and understand on my own and learn every single day. Basically, I got my ass handed to me every single day on the job. And so like that stark contrast was really hard to maneuver from an emotional standpoint. And then on top of that, the CTO role doesn't slow down at Loom. Loom is an extremely technical product. And so I quickly found myself putting in, 80 to 100 hours a week for about 7 months straight. And when I actually took over the interim CEO responsibilities, that wasn't that difficult. It was more that I just couldn't let anything slip. And so I can't put in more than 100 hours a week. And so it was less about like, what do I add to that? And it was more like, what do I remove and what do I like push on other people to delegate and scale, even if they're not used to it or they're not ready for that delegation or scale. And I got to the point where I was timetabling my day. Like I started to realize, okay, like if habits are built off of like incrementally doing the same thing consistently over time and trying to get X% better, if that's how you like actually progress, then the most atomic unit of a behavior is how you schedule out your day. And I came to this realization where I was like, oh, if I don't schedule out every 10 to 15 minutes of my day, when I was juggling 3 executive roles, like catastrophic things will happen. And like basically my entire, like I was already barely getting any of my weekend, but I could say goodbye to any of my weekend. And I eventually got into like a pretty dark place from like a mental health, physical health standpoint. I was drinking a lot again. I was, smoking weed over the weekends to like get my mind off of like all the problems I was dealing with within the company. I eventually got to a point, and I've been told not to talk about the fact that we did layoffs, but we did layoffs, and you can look it up online. Like I got to a point where like I think that if you get to that point as a leader, you get to look around and say, okay, a bunch of people are doing this thing that really sucks. And you get to point at the people and decide what kind of a leader do you want to be. And I looked at the leaders that were like, we're in a macro environment and we couldn't have predicted this. And I was like, I don't want to be that kind of leader. Whichever leader I want to be, it's not that leader. And so I dove really deep at the end of this incredibly hard period. And I thought, what did I do in my life that allowed this to happen? And I just took ultimate responsibility. And eventually what I found is that I allowed a lot of the values that I had cared about before to slip by the wayside. I'd lost a sense of direction because I just took on so much work. Direction became something that was like a luxury for me to think about, which is an incredibly dangerous place to be as an executive. And it's really easy to fall into it, especially when there's a fire hose of work that's coming at you all the time. And then I had like morphed my life around work versus around my health. And I realized like the thing that had led me to have so much mental clarity before was my health. And so I started taking health incredibly seriously again. And there's a lot that bubbles up into that. It's not just working out, it's also like a huge part of mental health are what values do you care about? And I realized that if you're not living a life of values, you cannot have good mental health. And then there's like a catch 22 there, which we could get into later, which is like, well, how do you earn yourself the freedom to actually live a valued life without getting fired, without like X, Y, and Z? And that's a separate conversation. But I realized that for myself, I needed to like declare my values and make sure that I was willing to lose everything from them, including my job, including all of Loom, including everything else. And that actually I wouldn't be able to secure Loom's bright spots and accomplishments. And it does feel like Loom is like back on an upward trajectory now. It's taken a while to get there. But I realized that that was not going to happen unless I was willing to risk losing all of it for the sake of my values. And so there's a lot that's bundled into that, but health has become the central part of my life. And everything else has become secondary. And I think I lost track of that.